Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the She Is podcast. Today, I get to have a conversation with Myriam Martinez. Myriam is a women's mental well-being coach, creativity mentor, and art therapist. Her passion is to help women move past stories of inadequacy, gain confidence, and learn to embrace their womanity. Did I say that right? I hope so.
Woman-ity.
Womanity. Got it. She incorporates creative self-expression to help women tap into their inner knowing and learn to trust themselves. And if I am remembering right from our conversation earlier, Myriam, your path into what you do now, who you are now, kind of goes back to, your journey up until this point, like your life experience, correct?
Yes.
That's amazing. Okay, well, I will hand it over to you and let you take it from here for wherever you want to start.
Well, I wonder if it would be helpful to give some context
Sure.
about how I got to be where I am doing this kind of work. So I always had a passion for psychology, since I was a kid, very curious about people and how they work and, all that kind of a thing. And I had my own challenging experiences with mental health as a teen. I had a lot of depression and started therapy pretty young. I was hospitalized a couple times for suicidal ideation. So I'm very familiar with the world of mental health as a client and as a patient. But it just further fired my passion, to want to do that kind of work because of how much benefit I got from participating in that kind of work. So that's what fueled my desire to, continue my education. And move into the field of psychotherapy and mental health. Originally, though, I was a preschool teacher. I started off with just learning early childhood education and child development, which was actually a fantastic way for me to start because it really helped me understand human beings from birth, through adulthood. And so I have this great knowledge, about human development and kind of how we unfold, throughout the process of our lives. So, and I love it. It just fuels me. I love to understand people in that way. But I kind of ended up combining that work as I transitioned into the field of mental health, in that I continue to work with children, except more in this therapeutic realm, obviously, right? And working more with parents, etc. And one of the themes that I noticed when I was working with parents was what was showing up for the moms. And so
Oh,
I just kind of started noticing that it didn't matter who was sitting on my couch, the themes were the same, right? I don't know if I'm good enough. Am I doing a good job? I think that I'm weak. I mean, it was just like constant self-berating. And it was like, wow, I'm seeing this amazing human being, who is here participating in this work because they want to do better and they want to be better parents, and all that stuff. Yet there's no connection to that. There's no connection to their wonderfulness. It was all about how bad they were doing, how bad they were feeling, just how bad they were in general. It was really painful. It was really painful and made me really sad to see that that was the theme, that was coming across the board. Um, so that's what fueled my desire to then focus on women specifically, right, and transition into the world of coaching outside of my private practice here in California. And mostly that transition happened for me because as therapists, we're only licensed in the state that we work in primarily. And so I can only service people that live in California under that license. And once I really got my juices flowing, with no, I want to help women. That's what I want to do. And I want to change the world in that way. Then it felt like a logical step to transition into coaching where I wasn't limited by my license and could support and help people all over the world. And that freedom feels really, really good right now. And so that is why I do what I do. It fuels my passion, to work with women, to learn to love themselves, to learn to see what's good about them, to feel good about who they are, and to feel more in control and management, of their own lives.
That's amazing. I just I keep going back to how you started in, like the early childhood part of life, and now you're here, and gosh, that must give you such a, I don't know, like a broader knowledge base, and to understand phases of life, each phase of life, so in depth because you've had experience with all of them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That must be a complete game changer.
I feel like that, and I feel very confident, in that knowledge base, not just like our developmental piece, right? But also our behavioral and mental health pieces and our emotional components, right? And so as a mental health professional of almost 20 years, I have a really good grasp on how to put all that together. And so when someone comes to me and has no idea, I don't even know what I want, I don't even know how I feel, all these kinds of things, I'm very good at being able to say, oh, this is what's happening, and I think this is what we should work on. And often my clients are very surprised, by how quickly I can assess that. It's like, well, yeah, that's my jam, that's what I do and I do well. And so I feel very confident, about that part. And I feel good, and proud that I have so much knowledge, because that helps me help my clients
Mhm.
in a stronger way.
Totally.
Mhm.
Totally. Um, you touched on women, clients coming to you and not knowing what they want, or that sort of thing. Do you find that being a thing that you come across often?
Yeah, and I think that, what's hard, especially in the coaching industry, based on my perspective, is that there's a lot of pragmatic, just do this, just do that, and then you're going to get to where you want to go, right? And it's not that simple with humans. We're much more complicated than that. And so oftentimes those kinds of programs, I know I've had that personal experience myself, set us up to feel like we're doing something wrong because I can't do that next thing, or I'm struggling with this module or whatever. And immediately where we go is, oh, it's me. I've done something wrong. And so then people stop pursuing help because they think they're beyond help. Like, well, I just can't do it.
Oh, wow.
Right, which is very heartbreaking for me.
Yeah.
So in the way that I market myself, I am very much about oh, it's okay if you don't know. Sometimes we don't know. There's nothing wrong with that. I really try to help women feel at ease and normalize their experiences. Like, you're not alone. A lot of people feel like that. And so I think the women who seek me out, even though they're not sure, right, are probably some of the bravest women, because it takes a lot of courage to say, I don't know what I want, but I would want help to figure it out.
Wow. Yeah.
That's really powerful to me, to be able to have someone go from, I have no idea and I'm spinning in my own space, right, to, oh, okay, I found my ground and I have some clarity now about what I want to do next.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so it's not that I don't work with women who are like, I know what I want to work on. Okay, that's great too.
Yeah.
Right. But for the most part, I feel like in my style and way of working, I try to offer an experience that feels nurturing and warm, and where people can feel really heard and supported and safe. Like, oh, she's someone who's going to be able to hold this for me and not put pressure on me or put me down or ask more of me than I'm able to do. It's like, no, I'm going to meet you exactly where you are. And I feel like that's such a beautiful experience for women, considering that we're such givers, to have this experience where they feel really held in that way by somebody else, right? And they can let go a little bit. It's
Yeah.
just such a beautiful thing for me to witness. And every time I work with a client and they're moving towards their goal and it's time for us to say goodbye. It's always super bittersweet because it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I just love working with you and yay, you're where you wanted to be, right? It's all the things. So it's just a
Yeah.
really beautiful experience that I just feel so blessed, to be able to do this work with the women that I touch.
That's incredible. In that, like, not knowing this space, right? When women come to you and not know what they want, do you find that there's like a common denominator of like where that stems from? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. My experience, right, and part of the work that I do is I try to help women tap into their own inner knowing, because I believe that women are incredibly intuitive. We have a sixth sense. We just have a knowing that exists inside of us. It's very, very powerful. But I believe that our society, all our conditioning, all of the things that we go through, all of the pressure, make women feel really scared, and they lose touch with themselves. They
Mhm.
can't connect to that voice, right? And so that's how I see the obstacles showing up. It's not so much the not knowing, but it's like the why. Oh, I'm scared.
Yeah.
There's fear, and I feel like I'm doing something wrong because I should know, right? And it's like, well, where did that rule come from? Show me where that law exists.
Right? Where did any of these dang rules come from?
So I really like to challenge that in
Yeah.
women, because I think oftentimes when I ask women that question, they're in a little bit of shock, like, I don't even know. Exactly. So it's not even your rule.
Yeah.
Right? So let's move these societal rules out of the way and let's help you tap into your inner wisdom. I know it's there,
Mhm.
right? So it's like, I trust first.
Yeah.
And then slowly they begin to trust in themselves, And again, that is just such a beautiful thing for me to
Yeah.
witness. And I feel very blessed and privileged to do my work.
Yeah. I kind of asked that question because like for so many for so long I have like said I've had this, this belief running in my head of like, oh my gosh, like I don't know what I want. I do though. Like when I really get down to it, like I do
Right?
know.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, like there's this fear that comes up of, oh, all of this crazy shit. Like
Mm-hmm.
I watched a reel this morning because like in my heart of hearts, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I want to coach women one-on-one. Like that's a whole different story. But and I've been stopping myself because I'm like, oh my gosh, who am I to do that?
Right.
Like I don't have the training, I don't have the certificates. But what's wild is that I do. I do. And I've been telling myself this entire time that that I don't have this training and it's just I came to that realization this morning and it just blows my mind how like the fear can literally
Oh,
stop.
it will stop you in your tracks. Absolutely. It will make you freeze and stop
Yeah.
in your tracks, But I think that it's actually deeper than the fear,
Yeah.
right? It's that we're afraid to show up.
Yes.
We're afraid to be seen. We're afraid to be with ourselves, look at ourselves, which is why women are constantly looking outside of themselves for something. There's so many women that I encounter that are like, oh, I know what I need to do. I just need to do a detox. Or I need to, and I'm like, maybe.
That could
But
be helpful,
yeah,
but
maybe. But let's look at like what's driving that. What makes you think you need a detox, right? And in my own experience of running away from myself, running away from, being seen, what I noticed is that there was this fear of being criticized,
mm,
right?
yeah,
Basically.
Yeah.
Like, well, what if people don't like what I have to say, or what, and that's what I hear constantly with my clients. And it's like, right, that's why we work towards being in here, so that we're not hanging out in these peripherals in other people's gardens, is what I call it, right? So that's
I love
that's
that.
the analogy that I use with my clients. It's like, if you are constantly looking over the fence at your neighbor's garden and admiring it and being envious and wishing that you had that, and all of that, your garden behind you is going to die from neglect,
Yeah.
right? So turn this way and look at your garden and just deal with that, right? You can make it look however you want, but you have to stay in your garden. You can't leave that, go over the fence into somebody else's world, because as soon as we do that, we
Yeah.
plunge down, right? Because we have that comparitis that makes us feel like, yeah, I guess I'm not as good as them, so I just can't do it. It's like, no, it's just that you're focusing too much on what they're doing versus what you are able to do.
Giving
So that,
so much of your power away.
yes, exactly. So, that's some of the language that I use with the clients I work with. I'm like, oh, stay in your garden. You're starting to look at the neighbors again.
I love that analogy, because so often, you hear like stay in your lane. So like hearing a different version of that is so fun.
Well, because I feel like that analogy offers space for creativity,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's just it. This is the essence of all of this is creativity. What are you wanting to create?
What do you want to plant in your garden?
Yeah. How do you want it to look? And that's the analogy of life. That's the question. How do you want it to look? What do you want it to be? How do you want to show up? You get to choose those things. But women often look at me like in shock, like, I do? Yes. Yes, you get to choose. You get to choose. There's so many things we don't get to choose in life. Life circumstances, stuff happens, etc. But there's many things that you can choose, and I'm often inspired, by many, many people. But I always reflect back on Viktor Frankl's work, who wrote, I'm losing the title right now. It'll come back to me. But in essence, he talks about being a prisoner in the Holocaust,
Okay.
right? And being in that experience, losing his family, etc. And his book, Man's Search for Meaning, there it is, right? What he basically says is, even in those kinds of situations of hardship, we have choices, right? So his choice was to focus on sunrises, or think about his wife and how much he loved her, or reflect on memories, so that he could stay in his garden,
Yep.
right? Cultivating it, no matter how small it was, within that experience that he was having, and how empowered he felt from that, because no one can take that away from you. And so what he noticed was that the people who focused on that they were prisoners, that this was terrible, that they were never going to get out, that kind of a thing, that those were the people that tended to die off under those kinds of circumstances, right? Because there was no hope. But in his experience, and some of the people that he, that also lived with him, that is what he kept going back to, right? Is that even in this kind of situation, we have a choice. And so that is a very difficult thing, because we like to give our responsibility over to other people.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, no, you get to choose, and I recently had a great exchange with a client. It was actually some fun banter, because she's like, no, I don't get to choose. I have to go. I have to go. And it's like, no,
Oh,
no, you
wow.
don't. You don't have to go. But there's consequences,
Yep.
but you don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that's one of the things that I feel so passionate about, is like, you don't have to live a life of have tos. That is so restrictive. And
Yes.
it feels like you're living for somebody else, and that is just so limiting.
Oh my gosh. So I was, well, again, this morning watching that video that I was talking about earlier.
Mhm.
Um, I was thinking about it, and like, of course, there are things that I love in my life, and there are things that I'm so proud of. And also, there are things that I'm not proud of, that I don't love. And like reflecting back, I'm like, holy smokes, like I am the common denominator, right? Like I created all of those things, the things I love, the things I don't love. And like that was such a powerful realization, to take that much responsibility for myself and where I am in my life and just all of the things.
100%. Self-responsibility is freedom.
Yeah.
It's 100% freedom. I make my own decisions. I'm not a victim of anything,
Yeah.
right? Barring obviously trauma, right? That's
Right.
like a
Right.
separate thing. But in everyday life,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you get to choose.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And it is powerful. It completely is a game changer, because you go from feeling like oppressed and like burdened and like forced
Yeah.
to like, oh, I can do it or not do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you get to choose that.
Yeah. There's,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, there's so much lightness in that. Like,
Oh, it's huge. It's a huge relief. We're very resistant to that. We are as humans, but once you get there,
yeah.
it's very liberating.
Wow.
Mhm.
I know when we connected for the first time, we kind of talked about your upbringing, your childhood, and like your experience in that. I'm going to boldly assume that that played a part in your career choices, where you are now, and just all the things. Would be
I
you be
think so. I mean, yes and no. I mean, humans are fascinating in that way. How do we end up where we end up? I mean, there's so many variables to that. I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is that my dad was also a very curious person that asked a lot of questions and wondered and, explored. And so it's a little bit genetic, that's my dad. That's how he operated too. But certainly with challenges, I'm an immigrant. I immigrated to the States when I was 7. I had to live in these two different worlds, the American culture, the Latino culture, and that was always clashing, and it was very, very challenging, and my parents didn't understand the world that I was in, and I
Mhm.
didn't really understand their world, obviously, right? Because they're just completely different experiences. And so often it just felt really lonely, like I don't really have anybody who gets this. And I think, at the time I didn't even understand what was happening to me, like how much that was impacting me, and because I think I'm a very sensitive person, and just life took hold, I just started to get really more and more depressed from a very early age, from like 11,
Mhm.
which is not unusual.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not unusual. It happens all the time. It's a tough age. It's a really tough age, and so it's not uncommon for kids to start struggling, with mental health stuff. But, this was a long time ago. Mental health has completely shifted. Now this generation openly discusses their mental health. The stigma is starting to melt away, but that wasn't the case, when I was a kid. There was just not the same kind of support. But even though it was a challenging experience, obviously, to have gone through suicidality and being hospitalized and all that kind of stuff, I mean, it completely informed, all at the same time, the power of healing and the possibility, right? So I kind of think to myself, and I share that with people a lot. It's like, God, if you can get through something like that, then we can get through a lot of things.
Hell yeah, we
And so it's like people forget that, and so often the time, when I work with clients, I'll be like, okay, let's look back on where you were, where you started. And they're like, oh, wow. It's like, right, exactly. But you're not giving yourself that credit. And so you're feeling like you're still failing, right?
Mm.
But when you go back and go, wow, for example, for me, I was a suicidal teen. I went through all this mental health stuff, and somehow I still managed to persevere, get my degrees, work in the field that I have passion for. It's like, well, yeah, anything is possible.
Yeah.
Right. So even when clients are down in the dumps and feeling like they're not going to get anywhere, I just kind of sit with them like, I understand.
I get you. I see you.
Yeah. And I'm not like a cheerleader, actually. I'm not the person that's going to go, oh, yes, you will. Don't worry. No, you're not going to hear that from me. I'm going to be with you in your distress, right? And gently help you take whatever next step needs to happen, right?
I
And
love.
we need to fall apart anyway in
Yep.
order to rebuild. And that can happen as many times as necessary.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all normal. It's all good.
I love that so much that that you just sit with them in their crap, because
Mhm.
over the last couple of years, it's just really like come to me as a realization, like there's so much, like being positive is amazing. Yes. And also there is totally like this toxic positivity thing happening, like, and it's disgusting. Like, can we just be humans? We have emotions, let's feel our feelings, like,
Absolutely. Life
oh
is messy. Humans are messy. Absolutely. No, I completely agree with that. And yes, of course, it's important to think positively and have positively oriented beliefs, but we can't exist all the time in that. And that's not human, first of all. And second of all, it's not the end all be all to everything. And that's a real pet peeve that I have, certainly in the coaching industry, because there's a lot of like, oh, just change your mindset. And it's like, no, no, I'm sorry. It's not that easy. And when you do that, you set people up to feel like they're failing
yeah.
because they're going to have negative thoughts and they're going to have doubts and they're going to ask themselves, why can't I just be positive? And when my clients come to me with that, I'm like, because you're a human.
Hello.
And they're like, huh? It's like, right,
I
let's talk about your womanity, right? Which is that you are a human woman.
Yep.
That's all that means,
Yep.
right? And you struggle, you're imperfect, you screw up. Yeah, it's okay.
Don't we
We're gonna have
all?
to sit with that for a little bit, and it's okay. It's
It's
okay. But
okay.
there's
Oh
so
my
much
gosh.
pressure to be okay, which translates to perfect,
Hmm.
that we can't show up in that way,
Hmm.
right? We can't say we're struggling, or we can't say I'm depressed
Hmm.
or whatever, right? Because, well, then you're not perfect anymore. And God forbid someone should find that out. And I'm like, actually,
Right?
we already know. So
You ain't fooling anybody
exactly,
here.
and it's so beautiful. And it makes me get teary, because it's such a process for women in that.
Yeah.
Like, wait, what? And it's like, yeah, yeah, I see your imperfection
Uh-huh.
and I'm still here with you and
Yep.
you see mine,
Yep.
right? It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. And it's so funny because one of my favorite things to do is make mistakes in front of my clients. So like if I slip up in some way, I highlight that. I'm like, oh, did you
I
see that? Did you
I
see that? That was a big mistake I just made. Holy moly, your coach isn't perfect. Now what are we gonna do?
I think you had told me that on our first connect, and now that, I love that so much, because what a way to
Mhm.
represent what you stand for, what you're passionate about. Like,
Right. Well, I'm not interested in being a guru,
right.
the person who knows it all and
Yeah.
just tells everybody what to do. It's like,
Mhm.
no, I'm interested in being a leader,
Yeah. Yes. Oh
which
my,
is a huge difference.
yeah.
Hmm.
So good. Oh my gosh. If you could leave our audience with any one thing, whether it's a tip, whether it's a piece of wisdom, what would it be?
I think what I want people to understand is that to be imperfect is to be human. And I think cognitively, everybody knows, of course, we can't be perfect, but the rest of your body hasn't caught up with that thought.
Yeah.
And you're still behaving in a way that seeks perfection, seeks approval, etc. And so that's the main thing I want people to understand. It's like, to be imperfect, to be messy. Humanness is messy. It is so messy. right? There's no neatness to it at all. We might have moments of that, but it is a very messy thing. So that being said, there's nothing wrong with you. You're just a regular old human having human struggles,
Yep.
right? And we all need some kind of support at some point, and there's nothing wrong with that either. To get support around that. And that's so important for me, for people to hear that message. Like, it's not you, you're fine.
Yeah.
You're just being a regular human, right? Let's figure out how you're going to human.
Yes.
Right? What's your humaning look like in the world, right? Because we're all different and we all have our thing. And so let's just figure that out, because I think women often see themselves as subhuman, almost robotic, like machines, and it's like, wait a minute, no machine can run 24 hours a day without some kind of consequence or without some kind of maintenance.
Yeah.
It does not exist in the world. So to think that you can just keep going and keep going and keep going because you're kind of reaching some, I don't know, external goal, right? It's going to keep you feeling like you're not good enough, like you're not doing enough,
I love that. I love that. I think one of my favorite quotes that I've ever come across is it says something like broken crayons still color or something like that. And I just love that quote so much. Like, not that human is broken, but like all of the messy, all of the
embrace the messy. Embrace your messy.
Yeah.
Right? I'm messy. I'm a human. That makes me messy. It's okay.
Yeah.
I feel like that's such a huge relief when you can just go, oh, oops, I guess I messed that up. Yeah, without like, beating on yourself for just a mistake.
Yeah.
That humans do all the time.
I would agree. So fully. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Yeah. Beautiful conversation.
Yeah. I loved it so much. Thank you for your time, your energy.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. My pleasure.
Awesome.